The year was 1985. Think back to what was playing on the world stage. A nuclear treaty was looking more and more like a reality. Communism was on its way out, while terrorism was on the rise. Against this backdrop of turmoil and transformation, the US and Germany were walking hand in hand down the path of reconciliation. President Reagan and West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl were to appear at a ceremony at Bitburg Cemetery to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the end of World War II. But the political storm clouds were threatening the sunny skies of Cold War diplomacy. The White House advance team failed to notice that the Bitburg Cemetery contained the graves of Nazi leaders. Members of the media made the discovery after the White House had announced the trip. Opposition was fierce. Impassioned pleas came from Congress, members of the military, from average people, and organizations of every political stripe. Holocaust survivor and activist Elie Wiesel famously confronted Reagan and said, "That place, Mr. President, is not your place. Your place is with the victims of the SS." In his other ear, Reagan received an empathetic appeal from Kohl not to cancel. Facing a difficult decision, Reagan chose to uphold his promise to Kohl rather than do what was seemingly politically expedient. Many say he did this, and he did the honorable thing by putting Kohl's wishes first and his reputation second. So, Reagan made the trip to Bitburg. And then something unexpected happened. At the conclusion of the ceremony, the former NATO leader and German war hero, General Johannes Steinhoff, broke ranks, turned to his Allied counterpart, General Matthew Ridgway, and shook Ridgway's hand. While it didn't heal the pain of the Holocaust, that spontaneous gesture alleviated a great deal of animosity. It wasn't Reagan's greatest moment, yet it underscored something very important. Great leaders must make tough decisions in difficult times. Whether you agree with Reagan's decision or not, it was a moment of unity, an exercise in healing and closure. While most of us may not be called upon to make decisions with major consequences on a world stage, we will be called upon to lead in situations where we can make an impact. I've worked in corporate America for over 30 years, first as an executive in consumer packaged goods and then financial services. For 16 of those years, I've served on various boards for one of the most prestigious Napa wineries to multi-billion-dollar poultry and financial service companies, helping advise CEOs on how to grow their businesses. During that time, I've seen and experienced many of these leadership inflection points. I've witnessed men and women rise to become great leaders. Winston Churchill once said, "All great things are simple, and many can be expressed in single words: freedom, justice, honor, duty, mercy, hope." In that same spirit of simplicity, I want to share with you simple lessons of business success and leadership using the analogies found in a pencil. Yes, an ordinary pencil, but there's nothing ordinary about this analogy. Comparing a pencil to a human being may seem trite, but it really helps me focus on 5 important qualities, the 5 qualities that are found in great leaders. The first important quality of a pencil and a great leader is this: it is what is inside that is important. Did you know that the pencil lead isn't made of actual lead? It's made of graphite and clay powder. So too, the inside of a person may not be what you think. What qualities make a good leader? It's important to have high standards, character, and good morals. Let me share a story of a leader who had great insides, and maybe in the process I will share a little of my story as well. And it is the story of my father. I was born in the Philippines, a third world country, or according to the new PC terminology, an emerging economy. I was blessed with ambitious and successful parents, not only successful financially, but also unwavering in the practice of their Catholic faith. I learned a lot from my parents and my older siblings. I learned virtues such as hard work and discipline. I learned frugality, no need for excess, look for bargains. I had 9 siblings, so we quickly learned to share. I also learned sacrifice and how to put the needs of others first. Sometimes it's the little things that have great impact. I remember us all waiting for my father to come home so we'd have family dinner every night. We never ate until my father arrived. That small tradition, which my mother insisted on, taught us important virtues like respect for elders, self-control, and selflessness. As with most successful families in economically disadvantaged countries, we grew up with lots of hired help, nannies, maids, drivers, gardeners. I went to a private Catholic school, attended a university run by Americans, and studied economics in an honors program. I had privilege, yes, but I appreciated that privilege and saw how hard my father worked to attain it. My father's name was Wellington, not a typical name for a Chinese businessman. My father was and is my hero, not only because of his business acumen, but because of his character. His family escaped communist China and fled to the Philippines. His father, the son of a wealthy general, was imprisoned during World War II for opposing the Japanese occupation of the Philippines and the atrocities that took place. My father was one of 12 children. He was the responsible child. After graduating from college, he took odd jobs to earn a living. As his father sat in jail, his elder siblings were absorbed in their own pursuits. So my father, despite being a third son, took control and became a leader and supported the family. Whether it was a new pair of shoes or something more complicated, his siblings all went to my father for help. 2 of his sisters wanted to attend the Juilliard School in New York, and my father supported them throughout their studies. He then started a business with a loan from his father-in-law and built into a highly successful enterprise. By the time I was born, the 9th of 10 children, my father had built a 10,000 square foot home for our family. Now, don't get the wrong idea. I'm not here to talk about my father's success. I'm here to talk about his character. What's inside? My father was a man of high integrity. He made sure the books were in perfect order, down to the last penny. While he was successful, he didn't make the list of the 200 richest men in the country. And yet, one year, the papers published the top 200 taxpayers, and there was my father's name. In a third world country overrun by tax avoidance and corruption, my father would have nothing to do with that. Integrity, high morals. He used to say, it's good to make profit as long as you do it with honor. It's also important to be disciplined. In the Catholic tradition, mortification and sacrifice are about putting to death the deeds of the body and denying ourselves sinful pleasures. For you and I, mortification and sacrifice might mean foregoing that second glass of wine, that's me, getting up earlier in the morning to pray and reflect, and even hitting the gym more often to prepare our body and spirit for the rigors of life, so that when we are tested, we will be stronger. When life hands us disappointments or we are confronted with an unpleasant situation, we'll have the strength to persevere because we can keep things in perspective. Have discipline and lead with discipline. In the business world, effective leaders promote and enforce standards for behavior. Having discipline leads to consistency. Good leaders treat everyone consistently and instill values that should be consistently followed. My father was tremendously disciplined. He insisted on quarterly reviews of employees and had no tolerance for thoughtless mistakes. He negotiated big deals with General Electric and Phelps Dodge and prominent Japanese manufacturers with thoughtful precision. Good leaders also embrace discipline in many more solitary settings. They're always working on themselves. They read good books and study the lives of great men and women. They don't waste time reading or watching garbage. Good leaders also recognize that in supporting others, they're taking care of what's on the inside. Leaders who are supportive understand and sense how other people feel and show a sincere interest in those around them. As my father's business grew more and more successful, he wanted to support his employees. So every quarter, he would give each employee a half month's extra salary. Then at Christmas, he would give them another month's bonus. He paid his employees 17 months' pay for 12 months of work, year in and year out. Employees stayed with my father's company for decades because of his business intellect and his generous support. He provided lunch to all of his employees every single day, long before generously stocked break rooms, breakfast rooms, and lunch rooms were trendy. So the first lesson from a pencil is this. Great leaders focus on what's inside. They focus on integrity and character. They focus on discipline. They focus on supporting others despite their sacrifice. They focus on reading, on learning, on meditation and prayer to build their insides, their character. The second important quality of a pencil and a great leader is this. We know we will make mistakes, and like a pencil, sometimes we have the opportunity to erase them. Problems do not age well. I learned that from Jamie Dimon, the chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and one of the great leaders I worked for. The best leaders face up to the facts, engage others, and fix what's wrong. Leaders and companies sometimes lose their way, but that's an opportunity for redemption. Reuben and Rose Mattis built a powerhouse brand called Haagen-Dazs out of a family business. Along with a great product, Reuben made up the name to sound important, elegant, and extravagant. And it worked, even though it was started in the Bronx, as people were willing to pay more for his ice cream. But after Mattis sold the company to Pillsbury, Haagen-Dazs lost its luster and lost the support of the average consumer. When I joined Haagen-Dazs in 1994, the brand was in disarray and losing share. We used past mistakes as a springboard to improve performance. Here is the problem. Haagen-Dazs was, at the time, positioned as being better than sex. I remember clearly an ad with a couple in bed eating Haagen-Dazs, and the tagline came, "Better than anything." In America, ice cream is about smiles and fun and children and wholesomeness. It is not about sex. The number one thing I learned from my early days of brand management at Procter & Gamble was understand your customers, understand their stated and unstated needs, and deliver for them. After interviewing customers and potential customers, we realized that people were using Haagen-Dazs for a treat. They got an attaboy from a boss and went home and celebrated with Haagen-Dazs. So we changed the positioning from better than anything to have a Haagen-Dazs. Your business flight arrived ahead of schedule, have a Haagen-Dazs. Your luggage didn't make it to Bolivia, have a Haagen-Dazs. Your son decided to wash your car, have a Haagen-Dazs. With steel wool, have another. We transformed it from an ice cream for elitists to an everyday treat for life's victories and setbacks. And the public bought it as Haagen-Dazs went to experience 2 years of record revenue and income. Mistakes come in all sizes and shapes. Sometimes you can help fix the mistakes of others. Sometimes you have to erase your own. One of my most profound mistakes came in the form of a career choice. I love complex businesses. That's why I spent many years in finance. So what was I thinking when I joined a snack food company? I love consumer packaged goods, but snack foods are a very narrow margin business. We'd negotiate grocery end-aisle displays and bought people who allowed people to buy their snacks on impulse. We lived by the motto, stack 'em high and watch 'em fly. One of the things we did was to increase margins, is to reduce our bag size from 8 ounces to 6 ounces, which is what our competitor Frito-Lay had done. Nothing sophisticated. Instead of focusing on strategy, we spent too much time and energy accommodating the distributors who owned the delivery trucks. We depended on them, and they could switch from one brand on a whim. In some ways, I look back on my time there and regret it because I wasn't growing. It wasn't fulfilling personally. But life is about how you resolve mistakes. In my case, I transitioned to financial services, which I found more complex, challenging, and rewarding, and where I could make a greater impact. The third important quality of a pencil and a great leader is this. Like a pencil, you will be sharpened, but great leaders know that sharpening will be good for them. Great leaders anticipate that problems will arise and that they will be tested. They are adept at solving problems effectively and then using what they've learned from the experience to make their teams and themselves stronger. I have deeply ingrained memories of the time when I went from consumer packaged goods to financial services. I left that snack food company for American Express to head up marketing for the Traveler's Check and Gift Check division. It was a major career transition. At that time, in 1999, Traveler's Checks were quickly becoming obsolete. The group president made me a promise. He said, "I've been here for over a decade, and I know everybody at Amex. And the way to get things done is by knowing people. I'll introduce you to everyone here." A couple of months later, he left the company, and I was headed for the blade, poised for a sharpening. Suddenly, I was forced to turn around a business without knowing anyone, or at best superficially. My boss abandoning me after I had just joined the organization was definitely a sharpening. Sometimes sharpenings are good for you. Among other things, I learned how to compose myself in front of a senior leader and how to collaborate with people who started as total strangers. The fourth important quality of a pencil and a great leader is this. Allow yourself to be held in somebody else's hand. By itself, a pencil can't do anything. It can't create stirring sentences or beautiful sketches without a hand to guide it. For us who believe in God, it's about being attuned to God's will at all times and doing His will. It starts with humility by admitting we don't have all the answers. So, cultivate a team of mentors, make connections, seek different perspectives. Great leaders actively seek input from others on how to innovate and improve performance. Great leaders use this input and their own experience to prioritize issues and make critical decisions. When I joined Bank of America, it was 2008, and our nation was in the middle of the financial crisis. In September of that year, Lehman Brothers was on the verge of collapse, and the popular sentiment was that Merrill Lynch would be next. So imagine my shock when I got a call from my boss at Bank of America one Sunday night telling me, "We just agreed to buy Merrill Lynch for $50 billion. I remember the date, September 14th, 2008. The very next day, September 15, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. Wow. First, we were buying Merrill Lynch, then Lehman comes tumbling down. It was a 1-2 gut punch. Needless to say, that was the start of an insane period of transition. Doubt and fear didn't just creep in, it broke down the door. Our world was turned on its head, and our counterparts at Merrill feared for their jobs. Honestly, we all feared for our jobs. In that situation, the antidote for fear was trust. Trust in each other, trust in the process, trust that everything will be all right, lean on each other, help each other. The only way we're going to successfully integrate these two gigantic companies is for each one of us to allow ourselves to be held in the hands of the other. Here were two companies that offered the same products. Each had capital markets, investment banking, wealth management, global research, global markets, trading. And as with any organizational integration, the key question was, how do we keep the best of both worlds? There would be cuts, and for those who stayed, how do we optimize their talents and their performance? If you were to imagine a scenario that's not ideal for an acquisition, this was it. There were turbulent times. Our stock hit a low at under $3. Keeping the business afloat was a big enough task. But something almost surreal happened. No one panicked. No one assumed the fetal position or went into isolation mode. We were truly a team. We had to apply all of our energy and know-how and, frankly, resourcefulness to create the best organizational structure and put the right people in place. We surprised ourselves with how much we accomplished. Sure, there were tense moments, and we seemed headed for a big cultural clash. Many of the Merrill Lynch leaders didn't like being acquired. They thought Bank of America was like Walmart, while they saw their company as a premium brand. Together, we emerged from the dark days of '08 and '09. The businesses were well integrated, and leaders emerged from both sides. We played to our strength and launched new products, including the Merrill Edge brokerage platform. Today, Bank of America is a $25 stock. Finally, the fifth important quality of a pencil and a great leader is this. It's important to make a mark. Make a mark on the world. We are put on this earth to make a difference, so make your mark. Great leaders have a purpose, a vision. They have meaning in their lives. Daniel Pink, the New York Times bestselling author on motivation, says that one of the most motivating things for people is to be able to do better by ourselves and the world, which he calls purpose and meaning. Have a purpose that's bigger than what you can achieve for yourself. Set your sights on what you can achieve for the greater good. As I mentioned earlier, when I was growing up in the Philippines, our family had a sizable staff of maids and drivers, a cook, whatever. We were among the fortunate in a third world country. Years later, when I lived in the States, I was able to secure a visa for one of our maids to come and work for me. I know, I was spoiled. Now that I was an adult, I saw her differently. A woman who I previously saw as just a maid had so many talents I never realized. She was actually overqualified for the job. She could cook anything and sew like a professional tailor. One year, she sewed 50 angels for my first fresh Christmas tree. And I stood marveling at her work. A thought occurred to me. I'll bet there's a market for that talent. But more importantly, there are thousands of people like her who just need a little support to realize big dreams. I've always been drawn to the idea of seeing the potential in people and unlocking their potential. I resolved to make my mark by giving the women in the Philippines the tools to maximize and, yes, monetize their talents so they could break out of poverty. I thought of the saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. That was the inspiration for an organization I started called the Fisherman Foundation. The Fisherman Foundation helps young women fulfill their ambitions of working in food service and helps female micro-entrepreneurs improve their profit margins. Businesses, too, should have a purpose beyond profit. B.C. Forbes wrote, "Business was organized to produce happiness, not pile up millions." That was 100 years ago in 1917, and it is still true today. In his book, Firms of Endearment, Raj Sisodia tracked 59 purpose-driven companies during a 15-year period from 1996 to 2011, and found that they outperformed the S&P 500 by 14 times. Purpose-driven companies and their leaders are built for the long haul. Purpose-driven companies and their leaders have much in common with the ordinary pencil. What's inside is important. They have got the capacity to learn from mistakes. They are continually sharpening themselves. They derive their energy from an ecosystem bigger than themselves. They are making their mark. After Reagan's controversial visit to Bitburg, the New York Times wrote, "Every presidential act has strategic significance." Right or wrong, the Times said the stakes were too high for equivocation, that breaking even the smallest promise to an ally in the nuclear age would be a grievous sin. We can't know precisely what was going through Reagan's mind as he stood in Bitburg Cemetery on that brisk day in 1985. His words, however, were clear. They showed resolve and exemplified the humanity required of great leaders. Too often in the past, he said, each war only planted the seeds of the next. We celebrate today the reconciliation between our two nations that has liberated us from that cycle of destruction. Reagan's trip to Bitburg illustrates the 5 leadership qualities of a pencil. Number 1, what's inside is important. It gave a glimpse into the character of the man. Number 2, have the capacity to learn from mistakes. Many thought he made a mistake going to Bitburg. Number 3, continually sharpen yourselves. Nevertheless, the episode sharpened him. Number 4, allow yourself to be held in somebody else's hand. Reagan took advice from the people around him who he trusted. And number 5, make your mark. Ultimately, Bitburg would become part of his legacy. We don't have to be Ronald Reagan to embrace and practice the leadership qualities of a pencil. Now that you have the pencil analogy and know how it translates to effective leadership, how will you write your story? Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to begin with a story that I heard from His Excellency Tadeusz Kondrusewicz, the Archbishop of Minsk. And it's a story about business integrity, so that's appropriate because that's what I'd like to talk about today. This story begins at the time when the communism was falling and former communist party bosses were very interested in studying Western business practices. And a number of faculty, business faculty, would go over to Russia and give courses in terms of how to do things in Western standards. And apparently in one of these courses, one of the students said, "Professor, can you explain what business integrity is?" And the professor says, "Well, that can best be explained by a story. Imagine, if you will, that a sight-impaired woman comes into the grocery shop to buy some groceries. She makes a selection, and then she comes to pay, and the clerk says, 'You owe 1,000 rubles. Well, she reaches into her purse, and she pulls out what she thinks are 2 500 ruble banknotes, but they're actually 2 5,000 ruble banknotes. She hands them to the clerk, so she's paid 9,000 rubles too much. The professor says, here's where business integrity comes in. It's a very important question of integrity. Does the clerk pocket the 9,000 rubles and keep it himself, or does he give half of them to his boss? Now, this joke works nicely for those who understand Christian morality. Oh, and by the way, I was not the business professor in this class. But, and it works nicely for those who recognize that the moral dilemma here involves a decision regarding fair treatment for a sight-impaired individual. But you know, the joke doesn't work for those without this understanding. And that's the problem that we face in business today in the United States. More and more of our employees hold values that are different from what we expect and are different from the values that were alive when the company was formed. So in my remarks today, I'd like to tell you why I believe that business integrity is the solution to making sure that everyone is on the same page regarding company values. And it's only then that we can attain good profit. So my presentation today will focus on 4 questions. What is business integrity? When did business integrity become an essential component of business? Why is business integrity so important? and what values and principles should be included in any company's integrity statement, or as Dina Dwyer called it, a code of values. So first, we'll begin with business integrity. When we think about individuals with integrity, we think of people who have a consistent commitment to honor moral, ethical, spiritual, and artistic values. And then when we apply that same word to engineering design, we think of the ability of a structure to hold together under a load, resisting breakage or bending. But when we think about integrity in a business situation, we combine these two ideas. We look at values and structures. So if we want to build a business with lasting integrity, we need to define the values we hold as an organization, and then develop a structure that maintains those values over the long term, even in the face of adversity. This, of course, requires clearly developed principles, controls, and then the building of a culture that is reflected in day-to-day practice, just as our panel just described. Well, I believe there's a great need for integrity in business these days. I think the world is coming to the conclusion that integrity is necessary. It enables trust. Trust, of course, is the glue that holds business together, and where there is no trust, there can be no business. Operating with integrity is the only way to develop and maintain trusting relationships over the long haul. And of course, integrity must be true across the entire organization. It can't just be part way. If the marketing department has it, but the shipping department doesn't have it, then the whole organization won't be able to do the right thing consistently every day. So just when was it that business integrity became an important part of business? Was this a recent development in the last couple years, or did it become part of business much earlier? I think the answer is surprising. So I'm going to look back in time. Let's go back before the business advances of the 20th century, before the scientific management movement, before the Industrial Revolution, even before I was born, all the way back to the Middle Ages, when the foundations of modern business were being developed. There were some key movers and shapers at that time. I'm going to start with Thomas Aquinas. He's the namesake on the award that we just gave out. Aquinas did many things, but he was also an economist, and he's the one that integrated the economics ideas of Aristotle and Augustine and identified the four key elements of business practice: production, exchange, distribution, and consumption. And his writings identify the importance of morality in all of these aspects of business. And you know, the same was true for Andrea Barbarigo, the merchant of Venice, who developed the agency form of business relationships in creating an international distribution and marketing system. And it was also the same for Luca Pacioli, the father of the accounting profession, who gave us the double entry bookkeeping system. And Giovanni Medici, the early financier who founded the Medici Bank and showed us how international banking can actually function. And then Thomas More. Thomas More is the one that wrote the first book about management practices. So these early pioneers in economics, marketing, accounting, finance, and management all understood that perfecting the art of enterprise required that everyone follow a consistent moral code. And we can sum up this idea in a single word: integrity. These early business pioneers all had a basic understanding of the need for integrity in business. Now, why is it that business integrity is so important? Well, to answer that question, allow me to tell you a little story from earlier in my career, much earlier in my career. It's an embarrassing story, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway because it's illustrative of the problems that many of us face. And myself and 3 friends, we had it with corporate America. We had identified a business that was available for leverage buyout, and we went out and signed the paperwork to start this business. And this was going to be a business that was going to be better than other businesses that we were involved with. This was going to be built for the long term. This was going to be a business that goes out and created really good customer value. And we were really excited about this. Now, this business had some problems. It was an ongoing manufacturing firm in the plumbing ware industry. But we thought we had the capabilities to solve those problems because the 4 of us represented experts in marketing, finance, manufacturing, and especially labor relations. But one thing we didn't do is first establish some sort of code of business or ethical statements about what we would do, principles of action for our firm. And this turned out to be a big mistake. Because somewhere early in the business, when we were going on trying to get all the things corrected, our finance guy commented to me, he said, guess what? Our billing department made a mistake. We overbilled our leading customer. It's a pricing error. The customer didn't notice, he paid the bill. I said, okay, well, I'll call them up and give them the good news that we're going to give them a credit. But our boss, you know, the guy that was taking the lead role said, wait a minute, Brian, hold on. We've already told the bank what we did this month. Let's pretend that we discover this pricing error next month. Oh, okay. So next month came. I'm ready to tell the customer. And again, we have another excuse of why what we need to do is the best course of action is wait to pretend that we discover this pricing error later. And it was a huge pricing error. And so we kept billing the customer at the higher rate, and the customer kept paying the higher rate. About the 3rd month came in on this thing, and it's still another excuse, and this is the really embarrassing part. I wasn't able at that time to convince my good collaborators, my partners, that we were doing the wrong thing. And I knew at that point I needed to change jobs. I needed to get out of this relationship. Yes. Sadly, this is the type of thing that happens more often than we think. Cynthia Cooper, the internal audit manager who blew the whistle on the WorldCom accounting fraud, expressed it this way. People don't wake up and say, I think I'll become a criminal today. Instead, it's often a slippery slope, and we lose our footing one step at a time. And that's what was happening to us. We were losing that footing one step at a time. And of course, that's how it happened to Bernie Ebbers, WorldCom's CEO. His fraud started out as a tiny accounting adjustment, just enough to make the monthly numbers appear to meet the budget. When the next month's numbers didn't improve, well, we extended the adjustment. It was repeated. This continued in larger and larger amounts until the cumulative adjustments amounted to over $11 billion, the largest accounting fraud in history at that time. Perpetrators of wrongdoing usually tell us afterwards that they tried to stop doing that wrong thing, but they just couldn't pull it off. In reality, they lacked the courage to admit the mistake and end the wrong practice. That initial action that they took looked so harmless and it looked so temporary. But doing that wrong thing, no matter how minor, invariably results in escalating commitment and then an inability to stop. Okay, now everybody's going to say, hold on a second. What you're telling me is that we got to obey rules? Aren't rules made to be broken? I mean, don't we set up rules in a company, but really expect some sort of ability to change things as we go along? make improvements over time, do things differently? I mean, aren't following rules too confining? Well, perhaps not. The great football coach Vince Lombardi said this: perfection may not be attainable, but by striving for perfection, we can achieve excellence. So I think you're going to agree we need to adopt worthy principles for our business, and we need to resolve to apply them in every situation, no exceptions. That way, we will lead to excellence. Integrity begins with this statement of values. Those values drive what the business does and how it goes about achieving results. Thus, good profit is driven by integrity. So even though integrity is important, it's getting more and more difficult to achieve. Today's society embraces relativism, multiculturalism, political correctness. The morality of right and wrong often only seems to be relevant to a peer group, people of like minds, but it's not relative to society at large. Many colleges and universities seem to have abandoned character formation as an intellectual and educational goal, and instead have substituted technology and diversity as their highest priorities. I can tell you that when we go to the market and hire new talent, they are unlikely to hold the same values that built the company. Well, we can't expect new hires will understand and observe the values of our firm unless we define them and communicate them effectively. So integrity requires that everyone in the organization observe those same values and follow the same rules of action. It can't just be the CEO or the CEO's staff. In this way, doing the right thing is integrated everywhere and throughout everything. So how do we develop values and principles? What do they look like? What information do they contain? I'd like to take a look. Now, if you're a Catholic, you're in great luck, because the Catholic Church has produced lots of guidance on doing the right thing. But even if you're not Catholic, you might want to look at what the Church says, because it's really good stuff. And besides that, why reinvent the wheel? So there are three areas that we need to examine in beginning to assemble this list of values. First, the commandments. They reflect the basic moral values that every organization should reflect in day-to-day operations. But the commandments aren't enough by themselves. Well, secondly, there are the virtues, beginning with the 4 cardinal virtues and continuing to the other virtues that are important for your organization. Virtues help us go beyond the basics and challenge us to continually seek out opportunities for improvement in what we do. It's kind of like continuous improvement paradigm. But integrity requires more. And this is the most important. Third, there are principles contained in the body of knowledge known as Catholic Social Teaching, or CST. CST principles describe what's necessary for effective human interaction, and when we can relate to others more effectively, our business blossoms. So let's look at each of these 3 areas in greater depth. First, the commandments. Christians and Jews believe that the Creator gave us great guidance on how to live. You know, he gave those 2 stone tablets to Moses on Mount Sinai. And that first tablet describes how we are to show love for our Creator. But the second tablet, that tells us how we are to relate to one another in this world. And these second tablet commands contain guidelines regarding respect for authority, equitable treatment of others, chastity in speech and behavior, property ownership, truth, self-control. In sum, the second tablet tells us we shouldn't lie, cheat, steal, kill, disobey authority, or crave something that belongs to somebody else. And you don't have to be Jewish or Christian to appreciate this guidance. These ideas are so universal that even those who do not follow a particular faith usually acknowledge that they provide wise and valuable counsel, the kind of advice that rises to the level of common sense. So, when we write the company's statement of values, let's start with common sense. And here's some examples of companies who have done just that. Here's the watch manufacturer. We must always be honest and open with our customers, our agents, our distributors, and our employees. We believe that openness and honesty make for the best relationships because it leads to trust and faith. Here's another one that's very similar to the same idea. This is from La Valle Bakery. Let honesty and integrity guide your words and actions. Every encounter with workers, vendors, suppliers, and customers is a new opportunity to build trust and loyalty. And here's another one. This is borrowed from Koch Industries' MBM process. Compliance. Strive for 10,000% compliance with all laws and regulations, which requires 100% of employees fully complying 100% of the time. Stop, think, and act. These were their words. I wish Andreas would have asked, how do you get to 10,000%? So let's move on to the second area, virtues. Now, usually we speak about virtues and applying solely to individuals, but they apply to organizations and businesses equally well. And of course, the cardinal virtues are prudence, justice, courage, and moderation. Prudence, it's the virtue that applies practical reasoning in discerning the best course of action. Prudence helps your business develop an appreciation for the true, the good, and the beautiful. Without prudence, an organization lacks insight and direction. Then justice. It's the virtue that recognizes rights and obligations in your business and makes sure that everyone receives their due. Justice neutralizes desires for advantage and helps everyone see the other's perspective. Courage. It's the virtue that ensures firmness in difficulties and constancy in the pursuit of good. Business people are sometimes reluctant to take the principled stand for fear of criticism. So we need bravery along with the mental discipline to tough things out, or we're not going to get the right things done. And then moderation. It's the virtue that provides balance in the use of resources. Although pleasure has an allure, moderation allows us to enjoy pleasures without harm to ourselves, to our firms, or to others. These four cardinal virtues help spur the development of all the secondary virtues that are so important to our businesses. Here's a couple of examples. This is from Zappos.com. Be adventurous, creative, and open-minded. Be passionate and determined. And be humble. Here's one from the Wine Group. Putting performance first and eliminating politics. Keeping it simple, continually reducing complex problems to simple solutions. And being proud, but never arrogant. And here's still another, I really like this one, Whole Foods. We satisfy, delight, and nourish our customers. Our customers are our most important stakeholders in our business and the lifeblood of our business. But let's now turn to CST, the most important principles that need to be included in your values statement. And as you know, Catholic social teaching is the result of the best thinking by saints and scholars who've analyzed the human condition through the centuries. And while it reflects universal and time-tested truths, it's also very fresh, contemporary, and supported by empirical research. Even though a lot of people don't know about it, that's a shame, and we need to change that. The teachings, of course, consist of human dignity, solidarity, subsidiarity, and the common good. We'll look at each one. Human dignity, that's the people first principle. This principle recognizes that men and women are uniquely created in the image and likeness of God. This requires that the well-being of the individual person is the first priority that a business does, of everything that a business does. So productive work should be organized so that it employs individuals in meaningful occupations, creates products that provide real value, and allows the development of all important aspects of the worker, mind, body, and spirit. So here's a good example of the application of human dignity principle by Marriott International. We put people first. And it says, take care of associates, and they will take care of customers. This is our founder's philosophy, and it's made Marriott International a great place to work for more than 85 years. The second principle is solidarity, and that's the teamwork principle. This principle reflects the inherent social nature of people and recognizes that only within relationships with others do we fully develop our individual potential. And when we work with those around us, we have an obligation to assist other members of the team to improve their game so that the overall team does very well. This means lending a helping hand to individual members in need or in trouble. Here's a good example from LaValle's Bakery. We champion teamwork that supports the efforts of your associates and encourages them to do their best. You can run with the ball, but it takes a team to win the game. And then subsidiarity. That's the personal responsibility principle. This principle requires that employees should be trained and trusted to know the extent of their responsibilities so that they can make good decisions about their job. And when this happens, employees develop their capabilities to become entrepreneurs in the business in which they work. And here's another example from LaValle's Bakery. I guess you know that I like them. We believe in empowerment to make a difference. So no matter what your role is in the organization, take initiative, make decisions, and demonstrate leadership. Finally, the last CST core principle is common good, or the stewardship principle. This principle promotes conditions in which all individuals and groups of individuals reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. The common good represents what everyone holds in common. It's the community dimension of the moral good. And here are 3 examples of firms that have built upon this idea. Here's Nucor Steel. Sustainability. Our company is built on the sustainability model of recycling steel in massive volumes. And we're committed to perfecting new technologies that reduce emissions and increase energy efficiency. Here's another one, Whole Foods again. We practice and advance environmental stewardship. We wholeheartedly believe in active environmental stewardship so that the planet continues to flourish for generations to come. And I think this one really does a nice job, Wegmans. With great courage, integrity, and love, we embrace our responsibility to co-create a world where each of us, our communities, and our planet can flourish, all the while celebrating the sheer love and joy of food. That's Wegmans. So, in summary, an integrity-filled business does not happen by chance. You must first identify the values and principles that you and your organization hold dear. And in that list, you need to begin with the standards regarding commandments, the virtues, and the core principles of Catholic social teaching. Without integrity, businesses can easily get sidetracked. Integrity helps businesses do the right thing every time, every day, day in and day out. When we work to build organizations with integrity, we're drawn to an exaltation of good character, ideals, virtuous conduct, and right behavior. This will involve both ourselves personally, but also all the people with which we work. And as a result, the world can truly become a better place. So in closing, I pray that your business either is now or will become a force for good in this world. Thank you.